The bourbon hit my jacket at 8:47 p.m. I remember the time because I checked my watch when it happened, not out of anger, just habit. 30 years in this business and you learn to timestamp everything. My name is Roland Pruitt. I'm 54 years old. I run Pruitt Capital Group, and at that moment I was the sole person in that ballroom who could authorize $2.4 billion to move. Not a single dollar had wired yet. That part matters. I'll come back to it. The Carver Infrastructure Gala was the kind of event that looks impressive from the outside and feels hollow once you're in it. Glass walls, gold trim, 300 guests who spent more energy managing their image than their business. Donors, analysts, regional officials, board members, all orbiting one family name, Carver. I'd been there about 30 minutes. Suit I've had for 8 years. Guest badge, no assistant, no entourage. I was standing near the bar going over the evening in my head, the handshakes I needed to make, the read I still wanted on Dwight Carver before the morning meeting. That's when Nolan walked over. Nolan Carver, 32 years old, VP of Operations, Dwight's son, the kind of guy who learned what power looks like before he ever learned what power costs. He had the walk of someone who'd never been told no in a room his family owned. He glanced at my badge, then at my suit. Then he reached past me toward a tray of drinks, and his glass of bourbon came down the front of my jacket. Slow, deliberate, he stepped back, looked me over, and said it loud enough for the people around us to hear. "Catering's that way, old-timer." A few people laughed. Not everyone. But enough. I looked at him for about 2 seconds, not because I was deciding what to say. I wasn't going to say anything. I was reading him the smirk, the posture, the way he glanced around to confirm the room had seen it. This wasn't an accident, and it wasn't spontaneous. It was a performance. Then I looked across the room. Diane Carver, Dwight's wife, was standing maybe 10 feet away. She had seen the whole thing. I know because she met my eyes for half a second. Then she turned and walked toward another group of guests like she'd just seen someone drop a cocktail napkin. That turn told me more than anything Nolan said. I didn't wipe the jacket. I didn't say a word to Nolan. I just stood there and let the room see exactly what had happened. Who did it, who laughed, and who looked away. Then I thought, I haven't wired $1 yet. Let me explain how this works, because it matters for everything that comes after. Pruitt Capital Group had committed $2.4 billion to Carver Infrastructure. Staged, performance-based, 5-year infrastructure modernization plan. The press releases were already drafted. Handshakes had been photographed. Dwight had given quotes about a new era for the company, but none of the money had moved, not $1, because a commitment on paper is not capital in motion. Final authorization requires me to make a phone call and say go. I don't do that remotely. I don't do it early, and I don't do it until I've seen enough to know what I'm actually funding. I have a clause built into every major commitment I've made for the past 13 years. Section 14.2. Reputational conduct during negotiation or closing, material impact, immediate withdrawal rights. I added it after a deal in 2012. A CEO mocked one of his own line managers during a company town hall. I saw it, dismissed it as a personality quirk, closed the deal anyway. It cost me 11 months of damage control and 3 institutional partners who quietly walked without ever explaining why. I don't make that mistake twice. The clause doesn't ask about intent. It only asks about impact. Later that night, around 11 p.m., my phone lit up. Perry Weston, the incoming CEO, scheduled to take over from Dwight within the quarter. Hey, about earlier. That shouldn't have happened. I watched the typing indicator disappear twice before he actually sent it. 4 words. From a man who's about to run a $4 billion company, who was standing in that ballroom, who saw what happened and said nothing for 3 hours. I wrote back, noted.
Thanks. Then I set the phone down and thought clearly for a long time. Here's the thing about signals.
Most people in this business are trained to watch for signals in the numbers, revenue trends, margin compression, debt coverage ratios, and those matter. But I've found that the clearest signal about how a company actually operates usually shows up somewhere else entirely. It shows up in how the people at the top behave when they think the outcome is already decided. Nolan Carver thought the outcome was decided. So did Diane. So did every person in that room who laughed or looked away. They thought I was a vendor, a consultant, someone there to be managed, not someone there to decide. That was the last mistake any of them made. The boardroom the next morning was set up with cameras. Three angles, red indicator lights blinking in the corners, internal stream running live. Dwight called it transparency. Board members called it governance optics. I called it useful. There were 14 people in that room. Directors, legal counsel, Perry, Hank Ridley, the CFO, two investor relations reps who looked like they hadn't slept. I took a seat near the middle of the table, not at the head, not at the far end, somewhere I could watch everyone's face when things shifted. Dwight opened the way he always opened, standing at the head of the table, posture straight, voice measured. He talked about a historic transition, disciplined growth, strategic alignment moving into the next phase. He had done this before, many times. You could tell because nothing he said required him to think while saying it. I let him finish the first slide. Then I said, "We need to address last night." The room didn't explode, it just tightened, half a degree, like pressure changing before a storm. A couple of people glanced at each other. One director set down his pen. Dwight didn't look at me immediately. He adjusted his cuff, left hand over right, and said, "A social misunderstanding." Nothing more. Hank Ridley was 2 seats to my left. He looked down at the binder in front of him. Didn't turn a page, didn't move at all, actually. Just looked at it like it might say something helpful. Perry leaned forward slightly. "Is this material to funding?" he asked. Careful word choice. Not does this matter, is this material? He was already thinking like a lawyer. Dwight answered before I could. No, I didn't correct him, not yet. I had learned a long time ago that you don't interrupt a man while he's telling you exactly who he is. A director across from me, Curtis, the lead independent director, 20 years on various boards, opened the agreement binder. Pages as rustled. He found the section, cleared his throat, and read it out loud. Reputational conduct during negotiation or closing that materially impacts standing may trigger capital withdrawal. He paused, then added quietly, "No intent requirement, impact sufficient." Dwight gave a short laugh, easy dismissive. "Boilerplate," he said. "Every agreement has language like that. It's never been triggered over a social event." Hank spoke without lifting his eyes from the table. It was revised at their request. Silence. That one sentence did more work than anything I could have said, because it told everyone in the room that this clause wasn't standard, it was specific. It was put there deliberately by me for exactly this kind of situation, and Hank knew it because he had negotiated against it for 2 weeks before signing off. Several heads turned toward me. I didn't move, didn't clarify, didn't confirm. I let it sit. Dwight recalibrated quickly, I'll give him that. He shifted from dismissal to minimization without missing a beat. "We are not jeopardizing a $2.4 billion partnership over optics," he said. "One incident at a social event, after hours, not in an official capacity. Your son was wearing a Carver infrastructure lanyard," Curtis said flatly. Dwight stopped. "And your wife was 3 board members away when it happened," Curtis added. He wasn't angry. He was just putting facts on the table the way you'd place evidence in front of a jury. Perry shifted in his seat. He opened his mouth slightly, then closed it again. He looked at me, then at Dwight, then down at his notes. I watched him make a decision in real time, and the decision he made was to say nothing. That told me everything I needed to know about Perry Weston's leadership style. Dwight kept going. He used the word optics 3 times. He used minor twice. He used disproportionate once, directed at no one in particular, but clearly meant for me. He said things with the confidence of a man who had never been in a room where his authority was genuinely in question. I let him run, because every sentence he said on that live feed was being archived, and every sentence was making my next move easier to justify. Finally, Perry asked the question I'd been waiting for. He asked it carefully, almost reluctantly. "Roland, what exactly is your role in final authorization?" Dwight jumped in before I finished inhaling. "He's here representing the capital partner." I let the word representing sit in the air for exactly 1 beat. Then I said, "I don't represent the capital partner. Quiet, the kind that has weight. I am the managing partner. I'm the sole signatory on the primary tranche. Final authorization, all of it is mine." The recalculation happened at different speeds for different people. Hank closed his binder. A director 2 seats down stopped mid-reach for his coffee and left his hand suspended in the air for a moment before slowly pulling it back. Perry leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for half a second. Dwight's jaw tightened, then he smoothed it out. "Then let's move forward constructively," he said. "The pivot of a man who's been in tough rooms before and thinks the way out is always forward." "Constructive requires acknowledgement," I said. For what exactly? Your son didn't embarrass a guest last night. He tested a covenant. That one landed differently than I expected. Or maybe exactly as I intended. Curtis looked down at the table. Two directors exchanged a glance. Hank still hadn't moved. Dwight folded his hands on the table like that settled it. We are not turning a social incident into structural instability, he said. That is not happening in this room. I placed my phone face up on the table, not as a threat, as clarity. Tell me, I said, why I should believe this won't happen again when the cameras are off. No one answered. Dwight straightened up. He looked around the table once, not for support, just to confirm the room was still his, old habit. The kind you develop when you've been the most powerful person in every room for 20 years. We are not issuing any statement over this, he said. There's nothing to apologize for. The footage can be contextualized. We can clarify intent. He kept coming back to intent. The clause doesn't mention intent. Not once. I wrote it that way on purpose. I waited 3 seconds, maybe 4, long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable for everyone except me. Then I picked up the phone. Activate section 14.2. I said it the same way I'd say pass the water. No raised voice. No drama. Just words that meant something specific to one person on the other end of the line. Nadine Forsyth, my general counsel, confirmed receipt without hesitation. Formal notice drafted. Immediate suspension of capital commitment. Effective now. Add withdrawal notice to follow within the hour, I said. Already preparing it. I ended the call. For a moment, nothing happened. The room just held its breath. Then Hank's phone vibrated against the table. One short buzz. He looked at it. His face didn't collapse. Hank was too experienced for that. But something behind his eyes went very still. He set the phone face down. Dwight watched him do it. That's procedural, he said quickly. Temporary. We'll have counsel address it within the hour. Hank didn't respond. A second vibration. Longer. This time, Hank flipped the phone over, read the screen, and set it back down without saying a word. But I saw what it said. Withdrawal notice executed. Then other phones started going. Not all at once. 1, then 2, then 5. Then nearly everyone at the table had something lighting up or buzzing or both. Assistants texting. Legal calling. Investor relations getting questions they had no answers to yet. On the wall-mounted screen behind Dwight, the one that had been cycling through his presentation slides, a market ticker appeared. Someone in the AV booth had switched the feed without being asked. Pre-market indicators, -6%, a pause, -9. Nobody touched the remote to change it back. Dwight looked at the screen, then at the room, then at me. You're not going to collapse a $2.4 billion structure over a social incident, he said, still confident, still certain. This is a negotiating posture. I've seen it before. I don't posture, I said. I document. Curtis spoke before Dwight could respond. The notice has been executed, he said. That's not posture. That's a legal event. He turned to the board counsel at the end of the table. We need to discuss fiduciary exposure. Dwight turned on him. We are not having that conversation right now. We're already having it, Curtis said. He wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. Perry had gone very quiet. He was looking at the ticker on the wall, -11% now. His pending appointment as CEO was contingent on a successful capital close. No close meant no transition. No transition meant he was standing in a boardroom watching his future dissolve in real time while he sat there and said nothing, which, I would point out, was exactly what he had done the night before. Dwight tried one more time. He turned to me directly, leaning forward slightly. You've made your point. Let's step outside, the two of us, and find a path forward. This doesn't have to be public. It's already public, I said. The feed has been running for 40 minutes. He glanced at the red indicator lights in the corners of the room. Something crossed his face, not panic, but the closest thing to it I'd seen from him all morning. Then we address it on camera, he said, recovering. We acknowledge a miscommunication. We commit to a review process. We move forward. That's what responsible leadership looks like. Miscommunication. I said, yes. Your son looked at my badge, looked at my suit, and told me catering was the other way. Then he poured a drink on me, in front of 200 people. While your wife watched and walked away, I paused. What was miscommunicated? The room was very still. Dwight didn't answer. What he did instead was look around the table again, and this time I think he was genuinely looking for someone to say something. Anything. To redirect. to intervene, to give him a foothold. Nobody moved. The ticker hit -14%. Curtis cleared his throat. "I'm calling for executive session," he said. "Board members only." Dwight's head turned toward him slowly. "I am the chair." "Yes," Curtis said. "For now." That was the moment, not the clause activation, not the withdrawal notice, not even the ticker. It was those two words, "for now," spoken quietly, by a man who had sat on 12 boards over 20 years and knew exactly what they meant and exactly when to say them. Dwight looked at Curtis for a long moment. Then he looked at Perry, who was still staring at the wall. Then at Hank, who had placed both hands flat on the table and was looking at nothing in particular. The motion came from a director near the end of the table. "Administrative leave for the board chair, pending governance review." Dwight called it panic. He said the word overreach twice. He reminded the room that he had built this company from a regional logistics operation into a $4 billion infrastructure group over 28 years. Nobody disputed that. They voted anyway. The motion carried, not unanimously, 2 abstentions, 1 dissent, but it carried. Dwight sat in his chair for a moment after the vote. Not because he was refusing to move. I think he just hadn't fully processed yet that the room had changed without him. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out. The cameras caught all of it. The market opened at 9:30. By 9:42, it was no longer speculative. I watched it from a conference room 2 floors below the boardroom. Hank had quietly offered it to me after the session ended. No explanation, just opened the door and said it was available if I needed space. I think he wanted me out of the main floor before the calls started coming in. I didn't mind. I had my own calls to make. By 10:15, the stock was down 17%. Not a collapse, a compression. There's a difference. A collapse is noise and chaos. A compression is the market quietly repricing everything it thought it understood about a company. Credit agencies flagged review status before noon. 2 institutional partners paused secondary commitments pending clarification. 3 banking partners requested updated exposure models before end of day. The capital vacuum wasn't loud, it was just measurable. On every screen that tracked this kind of thing. I was on my 4th call when someone knocked on the conference room door. I wrapped up, set the phone down, and said, "Come in." It was Brooke Carver, Dwight's niece, 26 years old, works in PR. She had been at the gala the night before. I'd noticed her near the entrance, talking to a group of regional officials. She came in and stood near the door, not sitting down. "I wanted to say something before you left," she said. I waited. What Nolan did last night was wrong. What my aunt did not saying anything that was wrong too. She paused. "I know that doesn't change anything. I just didn't want you to leave thinking everyone in this family thought that was acceptable." I looked at her for a moment. She wasn't reading from a script. She wasn't doing PR. She was just a 26-year-old who had watched something happen and didn't want to be counted among the people who said nothing. "Thank you," I said. "And I meant it. It doesn't change the outcome, but it matters that you said it." She nodded once and left. I sat there for a minute after she walked out. In 30 years, that was maybe the 3rd time someone from the other side of a deal had done something like that. It stays with you. Not because it changes anything structurally, it doesn't, but because it reminds you that the problem is usually concentrated at the top. The people below are often just trying to figure out how to survive the culture the people above them built. Perry texted me that afternoon. I should have said something last night. I read it twice. Then I wrote back, "You had the microphone." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, came back, then nothing. That was the last I heard from Perry for a while. His appointment as incoming CEO was placed on hold pending board review. Last I checked, that review was still ongoing. Some silences are expensive. His cost him a title he'd spent a decade working toward. By closing bell, the number was locked in, -17%. Analysts moved quickly. Governance instability, leadership credibility risk, investor withdrawal linked to cultural miscalculation. The language varied. The conclusion didn't. 3 weeks later, Dwight asked to meet. No cameras, no board, no assistants or counsel. Just a conference room in a building he no longer technically ran, overlooking a river that moved more steadily than his stock had. He arrived before me, which surprised me. He was sitting when I walked in, not at the head of the table. I noticed that immediately. Either someone had told him to sit elsewhere or he'd figured it out on his own. Either way, it was the first accurate read he'd had on a room in weeks. I sat across from him. He looked older than he had in the boardroom. Not dramatically, just the way men look when something they built stops being something they control. "You could have warned me," he said. "I did," I said. "When your son poured that drink and you heard about it the next morning and called it boys being boys on a live feed." He exhaled slowly through his nose. "That was a poor choice of words. It was an accurate one. That's the problem." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a barge moved slowly along the river. We both watched it for a second without meaning to. "I built that company for 28 years, he said. "Regional logistics to $4 billion in infrastructure assets." "That's not nothing." "No," I said. "It's not, and it's still standing. I didn't take the company down. I pulled a commitment that hadn't funded yet. What happened to the stock? That was the market pricing, what it saw on that live feed. Those are different things." He looked at me. "Is there a path back?" "For the capital, not under your chairmanship." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer but needed to hear it anyway. "Then what was the point of this meeting?" he asked. Not hostile. Genuinely asking. "You asked for it," I said. "I came because I thought you deserved a conversation that wasn't in front of cameras or a board vote." He sat with that for a moment. "You really believe one night at a gala justified all of this?" he said. "I believe one night at a gala revealed everything I needed to know about how your family runs that company," I said. Nolan's behavior. Diane's response. Your language in the boardroom. Perry's silence. I didn't manufacture a crisis, I measured one that was already there. He didn't argue that was new. We sat for another minute without talking. Then we both stood at the same time, the way people do when a conversation has finished itself naturally. No handshake. No hostility, just the end of something. I walked out into a hallway that smelled like carpet cleaner and fluorescent lights. The smell of every office building in America. And I thought about what Brooke had said in that conference room 3 weeks earlier. It matters that you said it. It does. Even when it doesn't change anything, even when the structure has already moved. There's a difference between the people who build bad cultures and the people who get caught inside them. That difference doesn't show up on a ticker, but it shows up. Here's the thing I want you to take from this. Nolan Carver thought he was sorting out a vendor. He was dismissing the only person in that room who understood what his father's company was actually worth and who had 30 years of pattern recognition telling him exactly what that family's leadership looked like under pressure. Diane turned away. That turn cost her husband his chairmanship. Dwight said boys being boys on a live feed and called $2.4 billion in committed capital an optics problem. And Perry, who watched all of it and said nothing until 11 p.m. in a 4-word text, found out that in a boardroom, silence is never neutral. It prices you, every time. I didn't pull that commitment because I was insulted. I've been in this business long enough that a 32-year-old with a bourbon glass doesn't rattle me. I pulled it because I finally had enough data to confirm what I'd suspected since the first due diligence call. The clause didn't punish the insult. It enforced the structure. That's the only difference between anger and consequence. And it's everything. Arrogance doesn't announce itself. It pours a drink on someone it assumes doesn't matter and calls it a night. The bill arrives later in a currency it never saw coming. The most expensive assumption in any room is deciding who belongs before you know who's holding the pen.